Hey yo, it's me, your friendly neighborhood Sam, back on my bullshit once again. Except this bullshit is a little different because instead of my more edited video essay-y flair, we're gonna try to do kind of a live talk, more of like a lecture discussion. And that's because last month I was very honored that my pals over at the Out With Us group in Providence let me do a live talk discussing fat positivity and my feelings around that. And the number one feedback that I got from that, well, overall the feedback was really positive, but the number one feedback from a lot of people was they were saying that they regretted if they couldn't come. You know, a lot of people had prior commitments. Some people said, oh, I really wish my friend could have been. You know, I have a friend that could have really benefited from the talk. So, to help all of those people out, I thought that I would do sort of a recorded version of this talk that I could slap onto my YouTube channel and anyone could see it. Well, to be honest, my first option, the lazier option, was I tried to just record my talk at the time so that I could have just slapped that online. But after watching the footage, yeah, I think it's better if I just try to re-record it. So we're gonna try to do minimal takes, minimal cuts. I really want to limit editing to kind of just preserve the feeling of a live talk, preserve my cadence, and hopefully this isn't an entire shit show, but we'll find out together. To start with, it's Big and Proud, a Fat Positive Workshop. And the first slide is, who am I? If you're watching this, you probably already know who I am, but if you happen to stumble upon this somehow, welcome. It's me, Samantha. My name is technically Samantha. Lots of people call me Sam. I am the Sam in the Sam the Anthro, and that's my channel name. So my educational background is I have a bachelor's degree in anthropology and French because I was an extra double major doer. And then I went on to do a master's degree in cultural anthropology at Concordia in Montreal. Along with that, I also spent some time being a teaching assistant and then being a research assistant. And then after I got out of academia, I went on to be a digital literacy instructor. All of that to say, a lot of my background is teaching, instructing, explainering, which is what led me to have this YouTube channel in the first place. I kind of started this YouTube channel thinking, hey, I learn about nerd shit all the time. Why don't I share some of the nerd shit I'm learning? Next slide, cultural lens. So I've talked about this a lot on my channel, but if you're unfamiliar with the term, a cultural lens refers to the framework that cultural anthropologists use to view the world. Basically, anthropologists view all of us as having filters that we see everything through. And that filter refers to your upbringing, your socioeconomic statuses, your gender, your sexuality, all of that, all of your lived experiences color the person you are. And those cultures that you're a part of really affect how you see the world. Now, I want to be careful in saying that it's not like we see entirely different worlds or that there's some like objective world that we should all see, but rather that we're all seeing things slightly different. The best way to think about it is sort of like a prescription lens. Most of the people who are listening / watching this probably wear glasses because you're a bunch of nerds. And if you've ever asked your other friends who wear glasses what their prescriptions are, you'll quickly find out that almost no two people have the same prescription. I mean, maybe somewhere in the world, but more likely than not, you all have very different prescriptions. And those prescriptions affect how you see the world. Cultural lenses are just your cultural prescription. And Yeah, and so in many ways, culture is very invisible to us. It's the air we breathe. It's the water we swim in. It's all around us and it's always affecting us. But a lot of the times we're not aware of that. That's just the way it is for us. And the only way you might really notice it is if you go to a different country or a different part of the world that is so vastly different from what you're used to that it becomes a lot more obvious. Next slide. Just say fat. So, I want to take a deep breath with everybody who's watching this, and I want for us on the count of 3 to all say the word fat together. 1, 2, 3. Fat. Doesn't it feel so much better just to say it? Fat, fat, fatty, fat, fat, fat. It's this word that we give so much power. We give this word so much power over us that we're so afraid to even say it. We use all these euphemisms. Sometimes they work, sometimes they don't. And I wanted to go over a couple that are okay and a couple that are not okay. So, if you don't want to call someone fat, what are the alternatives? Because some people are still a bit tensy about the word fat. You can call them plus sized. That's fairly neutral. You're just referring to the size of clothes they wear. I wear plus size clothes. I am plus sized. That is fine. You can also refer to someone as larger. So if you wanted to say, oh, could you bring that over by that large gentleman over there? Oh, my larger friend is going to the plus size section. That one is okay. Some people don't love it. I feel like it's very neutral. I've heard a lot of fat activists use it. Again, your mileage may vary. Your mileage may vary on a lot of these. So another one is curvy, BBW, thick. These are all different words that people use that have a sexual content to them. So again, if someone wanted to call me a BBW, a curvy, thick, it would really depend on the person for me to be okay with that. You know, if it's my friends gassing me up like, yes, girl, show it off, that BBW, that's totally fine. But if I'm just walking down the street and some random man calls me thick, that's a different story. Different context. The other thing is chubby, fluffy, more to love. These cutesy terminologies, again, if someone calls me chubby that is my friend or someone that I'm comfortable with, I don't think it will bother me that much, but I don't think it's something that you should use with a stranger or someone who's not, you don't know, is already comfortable with it, just because it can come off as really condescending. It is 85 degrees outside. I chose a very warm day to do this, and I had to shut all the windows and turn off my fan to record. So if I get a little sweaty on you, that's why. I'm suffering for you. So the words that we absolutely want to avoid. This is the most important section. Number 1 being obese or morbidly obese. So a lot of people, when you say don't use obese, they're like, oh, but that's a scientific term. You know, obese is a descriptor on the not the BMW, on the BMI. On the BMI, obese is a descriptor. And that is technically true, but we know from history there are a lot of terms that were once medical, scientific terms that are not okay to say. I'm sure you can think of a couple that used to be a medical term. That used to be a descriptor for someone. And because of the derogatory way it's been used, it's not an acceptable term. Obese in Latin literally means basically to eat oneself to sickness, to overindulge. It has a very negative connotation to it, even if we're not thinking about the medical connotation to it. And the other thing is that it just has a lot of shame attached to it. I've had a lot of people, when I've discussed my body or I've discussed other people with larger bodies, thin people will say, oh, well, I don't mind someone who's a little chubby as long as you're not obese. Or, oh yeah, she used to be kind of big, but now she's just morbidly obese. And you see where I'm going with this, that it has this really nasty connotation to it that just doesn't feel good to be described that way. So don't describe your fat friends that way. I've heard some people try to use person with obesity the same way that they would use person with color. And I appreciate you trying to find person first language and a nicer way to describe that. Still don't think that's great. Still don't think that's your best option, champ, and I really don't want anyone to call me that. The other one is overweight. For the same reason, if you're calling someone overweight, you're implying that there is a weight that they should be and that they're over that. And that is a judgment call. That's not cool. Next slide. Okay. Ugh. See what I was talking about, getting all sweaty? Getting real sweaty on you? Get sweaty with it. Okay. Fat people have always been here. So, NAFA, the National Association for the Advancement of Fat People, I believe, don't remember what the last A stands for, but it's NAFA. I will put what the full description is here. But that was a group that was founded in 1969 for the explicit purpose of advancing the rights of fat people. A couple years later, in 1973, there was the Fat Underground with the Fat Liberation Movement. And they also posted the Fat Liberation Manifesto, talking about breaking out of this cycle of diet culture and all of this negative self-talk that a lot of people were doing. But it wasn't just that, it was talking about the explicit discrimination that a lot of fat people face, and still face, to be honest. I'll go over it a little bit more on a later slide, but fat positivity, fat liberation, it's not just about, oh, thin people hurt my feelings, or thin people called me a mean word. It's so much more than that, because there is a lot of anti-fat bias in the US and in a lot of countries that is just outright ignored or even encouraged. But as I said, different slide, I'm getting ahead of myself. I wanted to mention a couple of historic fat people. The first one being Cass Elliot. She was a singer in the 60s and early 70s, one of the singers of the Mamas and the Papas. If you're active at all on TikTok, you've probably heard some of her songs. She and her group sang that song that became a meme of the all the leaves are brown and the sky is gray and the sky is gray. She also did You Gotta Make Your Own Kind of Music, Sing Your Own Special Song. So you have probably heard a couple of things from her. If not, you should. She's a beautiful musician. Sadly, she passed away, and I believe she was 31, 32 when she passed away from drug use. But we're trying to keep this slide light and fluffy. So she's a beautiful musician. You should definitely look her music up if you haven't heard from her before. Another one was Velma Middleton. She was a jazz singer that performed with Louis Armstrong. She was an amazing talent. She had a beautiful voice. You should look up recordings of her as well. And she was also just a very good performer. I've seen images of her performing, doing like full acrobatics, doing the splits, all this, and just like being really in the moment. And there's something so joyful about the way that she performs, and just more people should know about her. Marcus Garvey He was a political activist and speaker in the Harlem Renaissance. He was contemporaries with Du Bois, and Du Bois wasn't actually a big fan of him. They agreed on stuff politically, but they were in the same movement. But yeah, he was a political thinker during the Harlem Renaissance. There's also Divine and Jean Hill. If you've seen any of John Waters' stuff, you know, Hairspray, any of that, you've probably seen some of these actors. They're both amazing actors, actresses. I'll take a little. So the next slide. Fat people live in a world that wasn't designed for them. We live in a society that assumes that thinness is the default, and that affects the shape of the world in a million different ways. One of the big ways is furniture. I can't count the amount of times that I've gone to see a play or I've gone to watch a movie and I can barely fit in the seats. And I'm not even that, on the scale of fatness, I am on the smaller end. And I say that not to brag or to be like, oh, I'm such a skinny legend, thin queen over here. No, I say that because if I, at my size, am struggling and sometimes plainly can't fit in these seats, people who are fatter than me are having an even harder issue. And I want to highlight that as someone who is on the smaller end of fatness. When you order furniture for your apartment, your restaurant, whatever, a lot of the times there are weight limits on that furniture, and those limits are a lot lower than you think they are. A lot of the limits that I've seen wouldn't even fit a thin person who is on the taller end, because people who are tall also tend to be on the higher weight end, because that's how bodies work. And another aspect with furniture is going to the restaurant. A lot of restaurants, especially if the chairs have arms, can be really uncomfortable to sit in as a fat person. Another thing is clothing. This is one aspect that a lot of people are more comfortable with, or not comfortable with, but are more familiar with. And that is, a lot of clothing brands don't carry large enough sizes. A lot of them end at a large, maybe an extra large if you're lucky, and a lot of stores don't have plus size sections. Or if they do have plus size sections, they have very limited stock in person. Most of the stock that they have, you have to order online, and it's often more expensive than the thin stuff is. I was looking at Torrid's website the other day because, you know, the summer's coming. I really love a new swimsuit, and I don't think I saw any swimsuit that would have cost me less than $80, and $80 was being cheap. Probably more like $100 plus to have a swimsuit. And you would say, oh, well, Sam, if you don't like Torrid's prices, just go somewhere else. And a lot of the times, somewhere else doesn't exist. And the other thing is hobbies/activities. Any kind of hobby or activity that you can think of where you need special gear, where you need harnesses, special shoes, anything like that, it can be a lot harder to participate in when you're in a larger body. One of the things that I can think of is I have my scuba diving license. I love to scuba. Trying to find a wetsuit that can fit me, very big challenge, because even if you go to scuba specialty shops, a lot of them only carry up to a certain size. And again, there might be somewhere that you can find online to order that, but if you can even find it, you're first gonna have to order it to see if it fits, maybe ship it back if it doesn't fit. That takes time, that takes extra money, and you're probably going to have to pay more anyways, because if you're shopping at those specialty stores, if they have what you need, it will probably be more expensive. That's if you're even committed enough to the hobby that you want to buy something like that. Like, let's say I was just on vacation with my family and we wanted to go snorkeling, and I just wanted a wetsuit for the day so I could go snorkeling with them. A lot of places that do rental equipment only have up to a certain size, if that. So you either have to buy it ahead of time, which is extra money, or you have to take the chance and hope and pray that they have the size you need and just go day of to see if they have what you need and hope that they do. Because if they don't, you're shit out of luck and you just have to sit out of the activity. Or you have to try to find a shop nearby that maybe sells it. But again, that's more time, that's more money that fat people have to use just to do things that thin people do. Oh, next slide. Now we're getting to the bummer slide. Unfortunately, I tried to keep this a little bit lighter for people because this was supposed to be a bit of a primer for people who weren't super familiar with fat being a category that people identify with. But I think it would be irresponsible of me not to go in the ways that fat people are also discriminated against. It's hard work. It's hard work being discriminated against. The number one thing is that anti-fat bias intersects and amplifies other marginalized groups. So if you're fat and you're also black, or you're fat and you're also queer, you're fat and you're a woman, all of those different identities intersect and sort of amplify discrimination you can face. So one of those ways is with race. Anti-fatness has been used to further white supremacy by arguing that thin white people are morally and scientifically superior to black people. If you've ever read Sabrina String's book, Fearing the Black Body, she talks about a lot of the ways that fatness was used to justify slavery. Because slave owners would basically argue that, oh, look how lazy and not hardworking these black people are, and clearly we need to enslave them, because if we don't, well, they're just going to eat themselves to death. And these are the ways that white people at the time justified slavery, by saying that it was good for black people. Another example is Eric Garner, who was murdered by a police officer in a chokehold. And when the New York Police Department hired a lawyer to defend him, the lawyers basically tried to argue that he was gonna die anyways, and that he was a ticking time bomb of fatness. Yeah, just horrendous and awful on so many ways. Another example is gender. So a 2014 Vanderbilt study found that fat women on average work more physically demanding jobs and are less likely to get hired in personal communication occupations. And even when they're hired for those occupations, they're typically paid less than their thin components, their thin coworkers, even when adjusting for other socioeconomic descriptors. Another thing with gender is if you are a trans person trying to get HRT, a lot of the times you can be denied for HRT if you're in a larger body. If you're already in a larger body, the doctor may try to argue, oh, well, we can't give you testosterone, we can't give you estrogen because that will make you gain weight. Another component is class. As I said, people in larger bodies tend to work lower paid jobs, and even when they are in a better paid field, they're still paid worse at those lower paid jobs. Another thing is disability, because people who have underlying disorders can have those disorders ignored because of their fatness. Either the doctors don't even notice it in the first place, or if they do notice it, they might say, oh, well, we need you to lose some weight before we give you a surgery for your disorder. Or, oh, we need you to lose some weight before we put you on this medicine. So a lot of times when I talk about these issues, the things that people will say is, yeah, Sam, that all sucks, but if it sucks so bad, why don't you just lose weight? Every fat person has heard that, if not dozens of times, at least a lot. So, medical research has indicated that genetic makeup plays a large role in what your weight is going to be. They're not sure exactly how much. The percentage of how big of a role it plays depends on which research you're looking at, and it also depends on different factors like your socioeconomic factors, where you're growing up, different things like that. But your genetic makeup, if you have fat parents, if you have fatness in your family tree at all, you are much more likely to be fat and to stay fat. And studies also show that diets generally do not work. They don't work for a lot of reasons. One is that they're just generally pretty hard for people to stay on. Even if you can stay on the diets, sometimes your body just adjusts to living at a lower calorie count. So if you start reducing, trying to lose weight, that might work in the short term, but in a couple months, in another year or two, your body will say, oh, this is the amount of calories I have to work with, so this is what I'm going to work with, and it's going to stop burning calories, and you most likely will gain that weight back that you lost in the very beginning. Most people that lose weight gain that weight back within 5 years, if not gain back more than they originally lost. And also, places like gyms and doctors' offices can be incredibly hostile to fat people. If you try to go to the doctor or go to a nutritionist to ask for help losing weight, a lot of them aren't really trained in nutrition. I mean, obviously if you go to a nutritionist, but if you just go to like a general GM, they probably won't give you much advice besides like, drink water, eat your vegetables. And obviously if you're going to a doctor, you've probably already tried that and more. Another thing is, as I said, class also intersects a lot with fatness, so you may not be able to afford a specialty diet or to even see a doctor to consult you about that. And also, as I said, gyms are incredibly hostile. They're not fun places for fat people to be a lot of the time. I can say anecdotally that I've had people point and laugh at me when I've been working out in a gym. I've had people take pictures of me that they thought I wouldn't notice, or just make comments about my body when I had headphones on and they thought I couldn't hear them. It's just not a very comforting place to be. I wouldn't recommend it. Next slide. The big takeaway is, though, even if none of those factors that I brought up existed and losing weight was 100% possible for 100% of people, fat people are people, and they deserve your empathy, and they deserve to be treated with compassion just as much as any other group, and they shouldn't have to lose weight to be treated with empathy and compassion. Fat people do not owe thin people thinness. Okay, well, that sucks, but hey, what can you do about it? I'm assuming that you most likely aren't the head of a governmental body or someone who can really do much about these systemic issues. And this is why I want to bring up queer world making. This is something that I've talked about before, but to make it as simple as I can, queer world making came as a way to think up how can queer people exist in a cis heteronormative world. You know, I grew up thinking that the world was only cis and heterosexual, and yet now I am a queer, cis-ish person with lots of queer and trans friends. How did we all even know that this existed when we have that kind of background? And that's where queer world making comes in, because when you are brought up and exist in a society that doesn't want to acknowledge that people like you exist, you have to build that world for you to live in. You have to write your own rules, and they don't even have to be rules. It's just like a big sandbox that we can all play in and create a world that has queer people in it. And that should be the same for fatness. We need to create a world that includes fat people, that fat people are a part of. And that starts by just imagining that world and believing that fat people can be a part of it. So one component that I haven't really brought up yet that was a component of the workshop was a lot of my artwork was included. I brought versions of my artwork that people were using as coloring pages, and people were coloring that throughout the discussion. And I'm going to put those up on screen so you can see what those look like. That started as a personal project of mine because I've always loved fantasy. I've always really loved things like fairies and mermaids and magical world and magical girl series, which probably doesn't surprise you at all if you know me. But something that is really discouraging about that stuff is you don't see fat mermaids, you don't see fat fairies, you don't see fat magical girls. And I wanted to create that world for me to live in. I wanted to see this ethereal version of myself and my friends that we can also exist in that world. And you know, maybe that's not going to cure everything overnight, but it is a first big step. The other point that I wanted to make is that the great thing about being in a community, and I'm very lucky to have a large community in Providence, is that we get to decide what we care about. We get to decide what that world looks like. And by showing up to that workshop, by watching this video, you are already showing that you want to care about fat people, that you want to include fat people in your world. I also wanted to bring up a couple of fat media options because if you care about these issues, I think you should listen to fat people's stories. One of the big ones was Shrill. It's a great show that talks about fat experiences, and there is some great fat joy in there. I really love the pool episode, the scene in the pool episode where the main character is just dancing in a room full of fat people that are all in like bathing suits. It still makes me cry like every time because I think that was one of the first times that I saw that something like that could exist. It does also talk about a lot of anti-fatness, and people can be really shitty to the main character, so I would say have a tissue box ready if you're gonna watch it. But overall, I really think it's worth the watch. If you want something a little more nonfiction, I recommend Maintenance Phase is a podcast. They talk about a lot of these issues more in depth. They're both investigative journalists who really take the time to look into the science of fatness and discuss these issues. But honestly, anything by Aubrey Gordon is amazing, and I feel like more people should read her stuff. She's just a very great writer as well. And I've also mentioned Fearing the Black Body, The Racial Origins of Fat Phobia by Sabrina Strings, which is a sociology book. It's a little bit more on the technical end, but again, I think if you care about these issues and you want to learn more about them, it really changed my worldview in a way that I cannot express enough. Finally, I wanted to show a few ways that you can materially show up for fat people with your actions. 5 different ways that you can do that. And the number one way is making sure that if you invite your fat friend to do an activity with you, they can actually take part in that activity. Which I know probably sounds wild. You're inviting them to do something with you. But a lot of thin people are unaware of the challenges that fat people face. So if you're going to invite them to have dinner with you, make sure the restaurant has large enough chairs. And if you see that the chairs don't look big enough for your fat friend, being willing to advocate for them and just say, hey, do you have any other chairs? My friend can't sit here. As a thin person, there's a lot of power in you doing that and just advocating for your fat friend on their behalf. But if you're familiar with the restaurant and you know ahead of time what the chair situation is like, that is also great. If you want to go shopping with your fat friend, make sure the store sells clothes that are large enough for them to wear. I can't count the amount of times I've been so excited to go shopping with a friend and they take me somewhere I can't shop at. And then I have to awkwardly try on sunglasses or look at the purses while they get to go put on clothes and strut around the store and just have like a little girly time. And I'm over here like, oh, should I get the heart-shaped sunglasses or the star-shaped sunglasses? It gets old fast, it doesn't make you included in an activity, and it's just not a fun time for your friend. So don't do that to your friend. The other one is asking for consent before discussing any kind of diet or body image issues. This is something that as a feminine person, a lot of cis women kind of bond with each other by talking about this stuff. You know, they might say, oh my god, I'm just trying this new Atkins diet, or oh my god, I look so gross today, and just go very in-depth on their body issues. And I understand for a lot of people, there's a lot of comfort in doing that, but as someone who is larger than the person talking, that can be very triggering. A lot of fat people also struggle with body image and may have struggled with some type of eating disorder in the past. And as someone who has also struggled with those issues, that can be really triggering and that can make you relapse in your eating disorder issues. And that's not something that you should want for your friend. You shouldn't want to make your friend uncomfortable talking about that stuff. So just asking for consent ahead of time, just saying, hey, I wanted to talk about this new diet I'm thinking of trying, or hey, I'm not feeling so hot today, can we talk about that? Asking ahead of time means a lot. And being okay with no. If your fat friend says, hey, I'm not comfortable with that, be okay with that. And now I have to turn the light on again. It's on like a timer. I can't figure out how to turn the timer off, so this is what we're having to do right now. The other thing, just asking your fat friend where they would like to sit. You know, a lot of the times, if there is seating that is large enough for a fat person, it is usually limited and people will sit there first because having a bigger seat is great for everybody. So just saying, hey, where would you like to sit? And letting them have the bigger chair is really appreciative. Another thing is standing up for them when they're not around, which again, should be obvious. They're your friend. But there is a lot of thin people who will be a friend to fat people to their face and then make comments about their body or how they look when they're not around. And that is not okay. And you as a thin person telling other thin people that's not okay will go a lot farther than me telling them, which is just the sad truth. People who are more privileged in certain scenarios, standing up for people who are more marginalized is important and carries a lot of power. And lastly, stop telling fat people that they are brave for existing or wearing a certain outfit. I think thin people do this because they think it's genuinely comforting or it's a genuine compliment to tell them, oh, you're so brave, oh, you're so powerful, oh, I could never wear that. But it just comes off as really condescending. You know, imagine if you just got a new haircut that you were so excited for people to see, and when you showed it to your friend, they said, wow, you're very brave for getting that haircut. Wouldn't that not feel great? Wouldn't that not make you want to like go home and shave your head? It's the same thing. Just don't say that to fat people, please. And lastly, we have shameless plug time. So if you're watching this video, you already know that I have a YouTube channel, and I'm trying to get this channel to 1,000 subscribers. If you want to be a part of that journey, hitting that little subscribe button, giving this video a thumbs up, or watching some of my other videos does a lot for me. I also have a TikTok account and a Bluesky account. I'm trying to be more active on those. On my TikTok and my Bluesky, I'm generally more off the cuff, whereas my YouTube is more scripted and edited. But I do talk about similar topics on all, so if you want to follow me on those as well, you can. If you want to support me directly, I also have a Patreon account. I've been a little nervous about mentioning the Patreon account just because I didn't want to seem like I'm just horking myself for the camera, but this is work. This took hours of research. This took hours to put together, and I should be supported as an artist, just like all artists should be supported. So if you have an extra couple bucks to throw my way, I would appreciate that. I've also mentioned my coloring pages that were a part of the workshop, and I'm going to be including a document carrying all of those coloring pages. They're going to be like a PNG format so that you can print them out and color themselves if you'd like. And that's going to be, I believe I'm putting it at the $10 tier on my Patreon. And if you want to sign up to be a one-time Patreon, you can do that. And then you can cancel it the next month. But yeah, if you'd like to get access to that, if you'd like to support me, please check it out. And with that, I've been Sam the Anthro, and what did you think? Did you like this? Did it make you think about these things? Do you like the more off-the-cuff format? I generally like to be more well-scripted and well-edited, but this is fun. This is different. I hope y'all liked it, and I hope you'll watch the next one, so bye.